Let's join the Rise analyst now, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, for more discussions on the political campaigns. Like I said earlier, very warm welcome to Newsnight first.
Thank you very much, Christian.
Yeah, it's noted, it's a season of political campaigns, and they are really on the fire. I mean, the throttle is revving really high. What are your thoughts, about the plethora of campaigns, the promises, jobs creation, unemployment tackling? Ajaokuta again is on the cards. How many years? 40 years? Ajaokuta is still where?
Here we are.
Well, it's all interesting. Like you said, the razzmatazz can be very exciting. It's political times, more like a time of festival, the festival of democracy. And it's getting to a crescendo. We're getting to crunch time. The business end of the game is just around the corner, some weeks from now. And of course, politicians, the major contestants are also upping their ante, upping their game, trying to make their last-minute promises in some key areas, And we should just hope that at the end of the day, it will be all smooth, and that's what we expect. INEC looks prepared and preparing as well, raising concerns where it is necessary so that security agencies can also be up and about to forestall danger zones, So this is what it is, it is what we expect around this time, but it's also very gratifying, that they do know that the voters are supreme in this circumstance, and that's why they're deploying all machineries at their disposal to talk to the voters, realizing that this is not the time where you think manipulation, can be brought into the fray, because, of course, if technology works right or works well, and the way we envisage it, we expect a free, fair, credible election, and it's just the only way to go. It's the sing-song around the world, and we cannot be different as a nation,
Absolutely. And of course, it's just 6 weeks away to the elections. And if you look at the major political parties, looking at the likes of Rabiu Kwankwaso, he was in the northeast in Bauchi, then eventually in Kaduna earlier on in the day, that's the northwest. Peter Obi was in the southeast during the course of the week. And of course, today he's in Akure. Bola Tinubu, of course, was in the north and now, eventually found his way in the southeast. If you see major political parties, where I'm going about this is that we're seeing them go visit at least 2 geopolitical zones during the course of the week. Would you say that the logistics involved of hiring all the jets and all of that, would you say that's part of the reasons why we're not seeing smaller political parties push as much as the major ones?
I agree with you, Amaka. I think so. It looks very straightforward because it can be very, very expensive. And of course, facts are there also to suspect that sometimes even the partisans that come to the rallies probably cannot afford transportation, so they have to be supported somehow, with some handouts. So it can be very, very expensive, and we have had it, in huge tones that sometimes each rally costs a minimum of 100 million, depending on the state, depending on the size of or the kind of color you want to generate or you want to create around your campaign ground. You can be figuring it's something that is easily estimable, really, between 100 to 200, 300 million, depending on the political party, like I said earlier. And what about the movement of the chieftains themselves? Yes, you said it quite right. The other day we saw Peter Obi using helicopter to get to the hinterland somewhere deep in the east. Of course, you sympathize with them because these are places that they are probably not motorable, and that's why it's forming the subject of their campaign as well. They have no option other than to deploy the best means of transportation to get to these people. And of course, Atiku was in Lokoja today. I do not expect that mass of chieftains around him to go to Lokoja on road with the danger, with how dangerous the road it can be. So, of course, again, you expect that it's going to be a helicopter, and these things don't come cheap. What about the jets that they fly around in? Very expensive too. Sometimes I sympathize with them.
Politics is expensive.
Really, how do they? It's not peculiar to Nigeria. Everywhere in the world. What about advertisement campaigns? The newspapers, broadcast stations. Very expensive all around. Like I said, it's not so peculiar to Nigeria, the world over, And that's why some of them actually go for crowdfunding. They ask for support. And if they come to us, their supporters, directly or indirectly, asking for support, there's no reason why we should not oblige them. I think Omoyele Sowore actually was actually at the time asking people to donate 1,000 naira, reasonable as well, because no matter how rich you are, you feel the pain at some point if you are coughing out multi-millions, just to serve the people. somehow there should be a way that they should be supported. Maybe the system should find a way of supporting them really to prevent a situation where they'll be thinking of recouping, to take us away from the reward, the prerogative that we keep fearing. That sometimes when they spend this money, by the time they get there, they want to quickly recoup. How do we make their disposition to serve the populace? How do we make it less painful on them? How do we make it less
business on its own?
No, it shouldn't be a business. It should be altruistic. You are coming out to serve the people.
Okay,
ideally, it should not be business. Really.
Okay, let's look at the messages, being sent out by the various contestants, particularly from the 4 political parties and or the major contestants for the throne, like we say. You find Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, for example, meeting the Nigerian Economic Summit Group and business community and says, look, this is the way forward on how to revive the economy. Maybe you're going to have some tax holidays and increase productivity. Of course, the mantra of the APC presidential candidate is, renewed hope and moving from consumption to production.
I think the Labour Party too is talking about
the Labour Party, yes,
Peter Obi.
And Kwankwaso too is talking about job and education, which is his forte.
Education is
PDP too has emphasized education.
Absolutely. Then you're having Atiku, the $10 billion to regenerate entrepreneurship or enterprises and the economy, and now Ajao Kuta. How do you reconcile all these indices? They're hitting right at the subject matter, what Nigerians, what the electorate want to hear?
Yeah. Well, I think they are not short on ideas, really. Their manifestos, some of them are very, very rich. And of course, we're talking about the leading aspirants. Even those ones that are not necessarily leading, you have been very robust in terms of how they profile solutions, to myriad of problems that we're having. Well, sometimes our recent history also tells us that it's not necessarily about manifesto, it's not about promise, but it's about implementation. And sometimes when they get a win, something else confronts them and they begin to waver. What we need to do, maybe in the circumstance, is to also be very watchful and hold them to account, get them to fulfill the promises they are making, not just on the general scale, but in specific instances. Because I'm of the opinion, I want to believe that each time they get to a particular state, they study the state, the assistants will have told them what the problem of that particular area is, to speak to the problem of the people. But by the time they get to power, let them also go a step further and ensure that they fulfill the promises they make to individual states, individual region, before we come to the general. Because governance is not just about looking at the bigger picture. Specifics can also be very, very important.
Very important. The how, it's quite critical, because if you look at this article's promise of $10 billion, some economists will say, where is the money going to come from? Because if you look at the forecast for the global economy, the IMF says there's going to be a downturn this year, 2023, and 2024 is not looking great either. But we wait and see how that happens. But you are a professor of communication.
By the grace of God.
Strategic communication, to be specific. When we talk about the major political parties, we also have to not forget that there are 14 other parties. There are 18 political parties vying for this. So yes, some of these fringe parties might not have the war chest to visit all the nook and cranny of Nigeria. What would you suggest would be a good way for them to actually reach the electorate with their messages? Because at the end of the day, they are on the ballot alongside the big ones.
Well, very good question, Amaka, I must admit. Well, we are in the 21st century where there's a plurality of channels. If you cannot use the channel that the behemoths are using, you can also look at other communication outlets. What about the popular media, the social media that we talk about? What about town halls? What about word of mouth? What about direct visits to communities using, proteges, using supporters, leaders in those communities? What about traditional rulers, traditional leaders that you probably believe in? What about posters? So many channels that they can actually think about. But again, it's just telling us again that yes, they have done well. They are very courageous. Those are the fringe. That is, they are very courageous. You know, they are very, very patriotic, maybe determined. You know, and that's why they are coming out despite their weak resources. But it goes beyond that. We're getting to crunch time. Like I said earlier, we're getting to the business end. Maybe this is the time for them to probably begin to think about what next. You know, if at the end of the day they're going to be obfuscated at the ballot, you know, this is the time for them to probably think of aligning, because they have a stronger chance now to align,
I was
rather
just
than
going to
thinking
ask
of
you about
aligning
that,
after the election.
Measures and the rest, you know,
That's
the smaller parties and the rest. But in aligning, what kind of political values would they be bringing onto the table if only about 4, 6, or 7 of the parties are in the forefront campaigning? 4 majorly in the forefront.
Christian,
3 are still on the fringes, so to speak.
Yeah, but if you look at the individuals, you know, popularly, the individual leading the parties at the fringe, some of them are actually very, very brilliant people, very strong ideas, very strong characters. And they have demonstrated this in the media. They have also shown courage, strength, and inner spirit, traveling around, you know, assuring us that they can actually win this election if it is not at the end of the day they are allocated and they are alleging. So against that background, you will see that even if they align to one way somehow, I don't think that they'll be undermined, you know, by the big party that will probably be, you know, joining. The important thing is just to be realistic, you know, believing. Again, you know, it's about strategy. You know, so it's about strategy really. Exactly. If you don't win now, you can win some other times. And in any case, many of them have made impact. You know, they can also be looking at the future, and the future can always be brighter.
The future, and not only focusing on the presidential, there are other elections that are coming up as well.
Obviously.
Of course, it seems like most of these fringe parties are focused only on presidential. Abiodun Adeniyi, Professor, I must add. Thank you for joining us tonight on the program.